Can you do anything about arthritis? Can it be prevented? And what can you do once you start to have symptoms associated with arthritis? So let's say now you have arthritis. What can you do? Or can you do anything? Now the thing is, kind of like we talked about, so if you've worn away this articular layer and you've lost joint space because of it, we could sort of see that there are things that are naturally going to happen. You're going to lose range of motion because you don't have as much space for those joints to articulate. You're going to tend to likely experience aching pain, typically at the end of the day, because you've lost that nice cushiony surface, and now the bones underneath, which are very well innervated, will start to ache as they rub and grind together. So once you get to a certain point, yes, it becomes very difficult, and you can't really undo this process, but you absolutely can slow it down or stop it. So it's not that we can bring cartilage back, unfortunately. There's really no way naturally, currently, to bring cartilage back. However, one of the things that we can do is stop this process and or at least slow it down and make the joint behave better. So one of the big things to understand is that because arthritis is an ongoing process, you could sort of appreciate it in this way. There was a day when you had just as much arthritis as you did the day before, but now you have symptoms. So at some point in time, you suddenly start to experience pain and symptoms with it, but you had just as much arthritis the day before. It just goes to show that we can be asymptomatic or not have symptoms with arthritis. Now, also, if you're over the age of 30, it is very likely to almost guaranteed you have arthritis somewhere. So that being said, is you may already have had it if you think of it that way, but haven't had symptoms. So why wouldn't you be able to get back there? Now, yes, like I said, you can reach a point of no return, and that becomes very problematic where if there's really no cartilage left and the joint is very stiff and brittle and hard to bend, it becomes very hard to get much improvement out of it. But if you do have some cartilage left, one of the big things that we look to do is use that principle that I talked about the synovial fluid production. We look for pain-free motion. If you can get some pain-free motion, it helps create that lubrication in the joint, which gives not only the remaining cartilage some nutrition, but it also makes it more slippery, like we talked about. So there becomes less friction in the joint. And with less friction in the joint, hopefully it moves better and you feel better. So pain-free motion is a big one. The other thing is you have to understand that as the joint cartilage breaks down, the joint space closes and this space becomes much more narrow. As it becomes much more narrow, there's less area for it to maneuver and to bend. So one of the big things is if we can decrease some of the tightness around the joint, like in a knee, we can relax the hamstrings or the quad muscle. It then creates less compression on the joint. So as muscles come down and are tight, they start to pull the joint space together as well. So if we decrease the tightness in those muscles that cross that joint, we can create more space there, and more space means more room for the joint to breathe, and you can bend it a little bit more freely. The other big one is strength and really control, because the stronger and more stable the joint is. So for example, with the knee, every time you land and hit the ground, if it's sort of wobbling and shaking and absorbing the ground poorly, that's going to transmit extra friction and extra load through the joint. The more we can get the muscles around it strong and be able to control the knee or any joint better, the more of that load goes through the muscles and the less of that, what we call aberrant motion or that uncontrolled motion, goes through the joint, creating more friction. We want to absorb it with the muscle and we want that joint to land nice and biomechanically sound so there's less friction there. These are the big things that we can do to sort of help mitigate the problem of arthritis over time and hopefully not only slow it down but stop it in its tracks.